In a sprawling, colorful place known as Willow Creek Garden, where the sun smiled gently every morning and the flowers wore their finest perfume, there lived a tiny world amongst the tall grass. And in this world lived a very special snail named Sidney. Sidney was a delightful little snail. His eyes sparkled like tiny beads on the tips of his stalks, and he left a shimmering silver trail wherever he went. But Sidney carried a burden on his back. A great big, swirly, brown and orange striped shell. Sidney didn't like his shell one bit. "Oh, bother," he would grumble every morning. "This thing is so heavy. It feels like carrying a great boulder on my back. I wish I were light and airy like the others." One sunny morning, there was a great garden race in Willow Creek. All the speedy creatures were gathering to race to the old oak tree. Sidney's best friend, Beatrice the butterfly, fluttered down to him. Her wings were as light as a whisper. "Good morning, Sidney," she chirped. "Are you joining the race today?" Just then, Barnaby the frog hopped over. "Ribbit. Of course he is, but Sidney won't finish until tea time," Barnaby joked, laughing at his own wit. Barnaby had legs like springs, he could travel meters in a single bound. Sidney sighed sadly. "It is easy for you to say," he mumbled. "You don't carry a whole house on your back. Beatrice, you have wings. Barnaby, you have long legs. And I have this heavy old thing." The race began. "Ready, steady, go!" Beatrice fluttered off, flutter, flutter. Barnaby hopped away, boing, boing. Even Arthur the ant scuttled past on his tiny legs, leaving Sidney far behind. Sidney went. Slide, pull, slide, pull. He was so slow. The shell on his back wobbled from side to side with every movement, dragging him back. He hadn't even reached the first daisy patch when the others crossed the finish line. Sidney was exhausted and out of breath. He sat under a strawberry leaf and frowned. "That is it," said Sidney to himself. "This shell is ruining my speed. It makes me slow. It makes me tired. If I didn't have this shell, I could be as fast as Barnaby and as free as Beatrice." And so, Sidney decided to do something a snail should never, ever do. He took a deep breath. He wiggled his shoulders. He squirmed and twisted. He pushed and pulled. And with a loud pop, Sidney slipped right out of his swirly shell. He couldn't believe it. He felt as light as a feather. It felt as though gravity had disappeared. There he stood on the grass, soft and naked. "This is it," shouted Sidney. "I am free. I am light. Just watch me now." Sidney began to move. Whoosh! It was incredible. A journey that used to take a minute now took seconds. He had no heavy load. He glided over the grass, feeling the wind against his skin. He saw Wiggle the worm making his way slowly across the path. "Hello, Wiggle. Out of my way, Super Sidney is coming through," he shouted, zooming past Wiggle like a racing car. Wiggle looked back in confusion. Sidney? But, where is your house? Sidney laughed. I don't need it, Wiggle. It was just a heavy old weight slowing me down. Sidney spent the whole day zooming around the garden. He climbed leaves in seconds. He hopped over mushrooms, well, almost. He felt like the king of Willow Creek Garden. I should have done this ages ago, he thought. But in the late afternoon, the weather began to change. The bright sun hid behind giant, grey clouds. The wind, which had been a gentle breeze, turned into a chilly howl. The leaves rustled nervously. The birds flew back to their nests. Beatrice the butterfly hid under a rose petal. Barnaby the frog hopped under a lily pad. And then, plop! The first raindrop fell. Plop! Plop! Sidney looked up at the sky. It's only a bit of water, he said. Snails love the damp. But this wasn't a gentle drizzle. It was a proper summer storm. Boom! Went the thunder. The rain fell harder. For poor Sidney, without his shell, every raindrop felt like a heavy water balloon hitting his soft back. Smack! A drop hit him. Ouch! Cried Sidney. It hurt. When he had his shell, the rain would go tap 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 against the hard roof, sounding like a lullaby. But now, the rain stung his tender skin. The wind grew stronger. Sidney tried to hold on, but he was so light now that the wind blew him across the grass like a loose leaf. His heavy shell used to keep him grounded. Now, he was helpless. I must hide, panicked Sidney. He tried to squeeze under a stone. But the ground was covered in prickly brambles. A thorn scratched his soft side. Ouch, he cried again, pulling back. If he had his shell, those thorns wouldn't have scratched him at all. The air grew cold. Sidney was shivering. His shell was his coat, his blanket, and his shield. Now, he was cold, wet, and defenseless. Suddenly, a large shadow swept over the garden. It was Cyril the crow. Cyril spotted something shiny and soft on the ground. Sidney! Sidney shrank down in terror. Usually, when danger approached, he would tuck himself inside his shell and become invisible. But now, he had nowhere to hide. Luckily, a clap of thunder scared Cyril away, and he flew off. Sidney wrapped his arms around a mushroom stalk and began to cry. What have I done? He sobbed. I wanted to be fast, but I forgot about being safe. I wanted to be light, but now I am homeless. That heavy shell was my greatest treasure all along. Through the pouring rain and the mud, Sidney began to crawl back the way he came. He was searching for his shell. Where are you, my lovely home? Where are you, my safe castle? Everything was muddy. He didn't care about being fast anymore. He just wanted to go home. After a long search, near the strawberry patch, he saw it. His brown and orange swirly shell, glistening in the rain. To Sidney, It looked more beautiful than any palace. Gathering all his strength, he crawled towards it. Shivering and wet, he reached the opening. He wriggled and squirmed. And slowly, gently, he slipped his back inside the shell. Ah! It was so dry inside. It was so warm. Sidney took a deep breath. The sound of the rain returned to a comforting tap 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 on the outside, but Sidney was safe within. He felt like the luckiest snail in the world. A little while later, the rain stopped. The sun came out again, making the garden sparkle. Sidney popped his head out of his shell. He stretched his antennae towards the sun. Beatrice and Barnaby hopped over to him. "Sidney," said Beatrice, "where were you during the storm? We were so worried." Sidney smiled a wise little smile. I was learning a lesson," he said. "I used to complain about the weight of my house. But today I learned that the weight is what makes me me. It protects me, it warms me, and it keeps me safe." Just then, Wiggle the worm popped his head out of the soil. "But Sidney, aren't you fast anymore?" Sidney began to move at his usual, steady pace. Slide, pull. His shell wobbled gently on his back. "No, Wiggle," said Sidney. "I am not fast. But I am sturdy. And do you know what? When you go slow, you can smell the lovely wet soil and see the beauty of the flowers much better." From that day on, Sidney never tried to be anyone else. Beatrice flew, Barnaby hopped, and Sidney slid. Every time he felt the weight of his shell, he whispered, "Thank you, lovely house." Because he knew now that the safest place to be was exactly where he belonged. And in Willow Creek Garden, Sidney the Snail lived happily, slowly, and safely ever after. The end.